Hello again there, YouTube friends. Welcome back to N9TAX Retro Lab. On today's video, we're going to be doing part 2 of Home Lab Telephone Company in a Box, but this time in 2 boxes with the mighty T1 in between. So stay tuned, this is going to be an interesting one. So I've got a little lab set up behind me over here. I'm going to show you real quick how we're going to test and get this setup going today. Now, one of the requests I got after the first video where I set up a single router in order to place phone calls between ports on an FXS card and to be able to dial into a modem that was installed inside of the router is that they would like to see 2 routers connected together via a T1 and be able to make 2 simultaneous phone calls between the first router and the second router so that we prove that we're using multiple slots in the T1. So I thought that was a pretty good thing to try out here, and let me show you how we're going to do it. All right, so this is my setup. We've got, again, these 2811 routers that I had in the first video. There's 2 of them now, and I have them named Router 1 and Router 2 so that as we look at the configurations we can understand which one we're looking at here. And Router 1 is connected to over here via the first 2 ports on its FXS card, the blue phone and the black phone, and then Router 2, excuse me, is connected to these 2 red phones over here. So the ultimate goal here is to make a call between, one of the phones on Router 1 to one of the phones on Router 2, and then maybe the other phone on Router 2 back to the other phone on Router 1. So we have calls going in both directions, and we prove that, and then we'll look in the configuration, or we'll look in the router, and we'll see the usage of the slots and all of that, so we can see the T1 slots being used for the calls. Another thing that I've added to this setup just to make it a little bit easier to do is this Moxa N port. It's this serial server here. So what the N port allows me to do is it allows me to terminal into the routers over there through their console ports, through Telnet sessions or SSH sessions, depending on how you set it up. I just have it set up for Telnet because it's all living inside of my lab network here that doesn't go anywhere, so it doesn't really need security. Yeah, so that's going to make it easier for the video here. I can show you real quick. This is the terminal to Router 1, and then this is the terminal to Router 2. So, and I can switch it really easy so we can see what's going on there. So I made a little diagram here so you can see what we've hooked up. In this instance, we have Router 1 connected through a T1 over to Router 2, and each one of them has 2 telephones. Router 1 is set up with, obviously we're only using 2, but it's set up with lines 1000 to 1003, and Router 2 is set up with lines 2000 to 2003 on its FXX card. So that is the basis for this test. Now, I'll show you really quickly here. Take a look at our router here. We do a show run. This will show the running config. Now this is basically the config that was on these routers at the end of video 1. The only difference is the cards. I've added the T1 cards already. I showed you how to put cards in video 1, so we don't need to do that again. Something to pay attention to at the beginning here, because this is something that the router put in the configuration as the cards were put in. Is this card type command needed for slot VWIC slot 00 and slot VWIC slot 02. That will be important here in a little bit as we go through how to set this up, but I just wanted to point that out for now. The rest of it I'll go through real quick. We have all our dial-up stuff that was in here from the last video. Our voice ports, it's our dial peers. Remember, the dial peers tell the router what to do with the phone numbers that are dialed, right? So if you dial a 1002, it's going to go to this port, to the phone that's on that port. So Another interesting thing to pay attention here too is that there's no interface in this config for the T1 cards. And this goes back to what it says here in the beginning with this card type command needed. So let's get started with that and get this thing going. So now we're only going to set up one card right now. We're going to set up this slot 00 card, which is the bottom card. Again, Cisco, you know, right to left, bottom to top, they number things. So that is the lower, very right card is 00. So the command that we need to start out here is card type T100. Now let me tell you what this is doing, right? So you remember back at the beginning it said we need the card type command for the card in slot 00. So let's go into our configuration terminal here and let's do a card type, if I can type, command. Let's hit a question mark. So the reason it asks for the card type command is because you can set up the cards as an E1 card or a T1 card. The card doesn't care, you tell it what you want it to be. So for those of you who might be watching in a European country, you may want to set your cards up as an E1, not a T1, and this is how you would do it after you first insert the card. So we're going to set it up as a T1, and we have to tell it also what slot that it's in, and this particular command just wants 0 space 0. So if I hit that, it's happy, it took the command. Now if I do a do show run, and again in config you have to do a do in front of show run or it won't work. Now it's only yelling at me about the card in slot 2, which we don't care about because we're not using that card right now. But card type T100 is now not commented out and it seems happy. So if we go down a little farther, you'll now see that we have controller 000. We didn't have that before. So now we can start programming the T1 controller to do something. So let's get back to our configuration mode and let's go into controller T1, what is it, 000. So now we're in the controller, and you'll see that by, you know, the fact that it says controller here. So inside the controller, if you notice that it says cable length long 0 dB up above, what that does is it sets the attenuation for the card. You know, 0 dBs, that's a really hot signal. That's, I think, as hot as it gets on the T1 card, it'll go a long way. So we really don't want that because we have like a 6-inch cord between the two cards. So we're gonna do a cable length command, and we're gonna say cable length short. And if you hit the question mark, it does give you like some foot markings there. Incidentally, if we do a long, let's see. Yeah, long gives you dBs, so not sure how to work out how many dBs I need in a cable length, but I think those are really long cables is what it's looking for. So we're going to go with cable length short though, because we have a little short cable on there, and the shortest length I can go is 0 to 110 feet. So we're going to go 110, and that's just going to attenuate the signal so we're not blasting the receiver on the other card, which is probably not a good thing. We can't do anything else in here right now until we do a couple of other commands. So let me go back to the straight configuration terminal here. Now we have to talk about T1s a little bit, and we need to talk about the different types of T1s that there are. And again, I'm not an expert. I don't know everything there is to know about T1s. I just know a little bit, enough to make myself dangerous, I guess, and enough to play with this home lab stuff. So if I get any of this wrong, please, constructive comments that teach everyone who's watching this video would be greatly appreciated. So basically, there's two types of T1s that we could set up on this box as I understand it. There's a channelized T1, and there's a primary rate interface T1. Now, channelized T1 will do what we want it to do as far as moving calls back and forth. between the routers, but there are some things that it can't do. I don't believe it can pass caller ID, and it doesn't. It also does what they call robbed bit signaling, where it uses a few of the bits in the frames for each channel to send the signaling across, where a PRI, or a primary rate interface, has the 24th channel they call the D channel, is a call control and signaling information channel, and so it's out of band. It's not, in the band. In band means like with the frame data that your call is using. Channelized T1 uses in band signaling, so primary rate interface uses out of band signaling, which is superior because you can get more data in that channel, and you can it has a lot more features like caller ID can pass, and call hunting and routing, and more detailed diagnostics and things like that. So it also, I read that it has a little bit better voice quality, and for home lab it's probably not that important, but if you're messing around with modems and stuff like that, the more data you can get through the path, the better, because you're going to have a higher quality and a better chance of your getting higher dial-up speeds and things like that. So I'd originally thought about setting up channelized T1 and then converting it to PRI, but I don't see any real advantage to doing that except taking up your time. So we're just going to start by setting this up for PRI, and yeah, let's do that right now. So that being said, there is something that we have to do before we can do the settings in the controller, and we have to enter this command. We have to tell it what kind of T1 that it's going to be, right? So the command is ISDN switch type primary NI. Now, there are other switch types that are used in other countries, and yeah, so there's Lucent 4 ESS, 5 ESS. I don't know what the value of those are. Maybe they're more proprietary. There's the Northern Telecom DMS 100 standard. Let's see what else. There's a Japanese standard there. There's an Australian standard, a Net5 for UK, and DPNSS, which is a European standard. So yeah, there's a bunch of different standards that you can use, and at this point I think the important thing for us is that we just use the same thing on both sides. But that being said, I'm going to use the primary NI because that's the national standard here in the US for T1, so that'll probably be the most compatible with other devices that I might connect these things to in the future. So now that we have done that, there's one other thing that we have to do. So if we do a do show run, we look up at the top here. This says no network clock participate WIC 0. We want to participate clock. So we have to say network clock participate WIC 0. So that's an important thing. And I'll put all these commands in the comments, the additional commands to get the T1s up and running. And the first video had the full config for the router, so between the two you should be able to do everything that I'm doing here with just some cut and paste. Okay, so we have the clock. So now we can go back into our controller and get into the meat and potatoes of it. So now we have to tell it what time slots we want to be part of the PRI group. So the PRI group is the group of resources that is used to move this data from one side of the T1 to the other. So the command for that is PRI group time slots 1 through however many you want. I'm going to use them all, so that's 1 through 24. Situations where you might not use them all: if you don't have enough PVDMs in your router, if you remember from the first one, that was one of the requirements to getting the FXS ports to work, was that we had to put PVDM cards, which are the DSP modules, inside the router, or the voice ports did not work. These also require PVDM slots. So if you don't have a large enough PVDM, you might not be able to use all 24 time slots. You might not need all 24 time slots for some home lab stuff, so it's not necessarily that big of a deal. But this is where you would make that differentiation, and you need to set up both sides the same way so that they both use the same number of slots. In fact, router 2 doesn't have enough of that resource to use all 24 slots on both cards. So when I go to configure router 2, I can show you that, and you'll see the error that it gives you when you don't have enough resources. So I know I'm being pedantic here, but let's do another do show run, because now that we did that PRI group command, we are going to get something new in the configuration here that wasn't here before, and that is this serial interface. This popped up all on its own as soon as we put that command in, and it's mostly all filled out for us. There's only one additional thing that we have to do here, and we only have to do it on one side of the T1, and that is because we're using PRI, and PRI was a standard that came from the phone company. You wouldn't typically set up PRIs between devices like we're doing here back when they were actually using the stuff for primary telephone and data. One side has to be set up to emulate the phone company. So let me show you how to do that. We can get out of this controller, and we need to go into the serial interface. So we could say interface serial 000, and we have to put this 23, because what this is saying is that this is applying this config to all 23 ports on that serial interface, because we set up 24 ports, but it's here numbered 0 through 23, of course. Okay, so now we're in the interface, and the command that we need, and again, this is just on one side, is ISDN protocol emulate network. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow this router to pretend it's the phone company. So from the other router's perspective, it will think that it's just hooked to a T1 at the phone company. If you don't do that, PRI will not work between these two. You do not have to do this with channelized T1, but you do have to if you're using PRI in. And again, it doesn't matter which side you do it on, but only do it on one side. Okay, so we've configured our controller, and we've configured the serial interfaces. So the next thing we have to worry about, and this is the exact same thing that we did when we set up the FXS ports in video 1. Incidentally, if you haven't watched video 1, you should probably go back and watch that first, is we need to set up a dial peer. And what a dial peer does is it tells the router what calls to route through this port. So we need to say something like dial peer voice 10, and that number can be anything. I'm just going to use 10 POTS because they're POTS lines, and now we're in a dial peer. So what do we need to put in a dial peer? So we need a destination pattern, and the destination pattern says, if phones in this router call a certain number, where do they go? Like we have our dial peers with destination patterns on each of the FXS ports that have the number for that port. So it's just a single number. If you dial 1000, it goes out port 0 on the FXS card. Here we're sending calls to another router. And that router, router 2, is using the 2000 range. So anything from 2000 to 2999. Now, how do we do that? So we say destination pattern 2, and the ... are wildcards. So what the ... tells it is any number from 0 through 9 or pound is what a dot stands for, and 3 digits because we put 3 dots. So it's only gonna forward calls that are 4 total digits that start with a 2 and end with any number from 000 to 999. So we'll enter that. We also have to tell it what calls can come in through this interface. Now, arguably, and for simplicity's sake, we really don't care what calls come in, right? We want to let all calls that are coming through this T1 interface into the router, and then let the router decide whether or not it can do anything with them. So we're just going to say incoming called number dot. And the dot tells it, I don't care, give me them all. There's another command that I was using in these, fax rate disable. This disables a feature that does something special for fax calls, but it just basically allows fax calls to pass through. And it's kind of weird because it's fax rate disabled, but it's the rate thing that we're disabling and we're allowing pass through. And if you're going to use these lines for data calls like modems and stuff like that, it is suggested that you use the fax rate disable. In fact, there's some other things that you can put in here to make your dial-up calls more robust too, but we're just gonna keep this simple for today. So the other thing is direct inward dial. We want people from outside to be able to call the extensions directly without having to go through an operator or a switchboard or anything like that. So that's what that means. Now the most important thing to set up is the port, right? Because the port tells it what is this dial peer applying to? And that is the port, is that port number that's on the serial interface. So it's 0/0/0:23. And it could be different in your router depending on what type of router it is. But in this router, it's that. So we'll say that's our port. Now the last thing we're going to do is forward digits all. And all that's telling the router is whatever digits I dial, send them all through in the signaling bits in the signaling channel, so that on the other side, the router gets all the. Now, where you might not use that is like if you were set up, you know, if you think about businesses who are set up to like dial a 9 to get an outside line, you would tell this specifically which digits to forward so that it didn't forward the 9, right? Because we're not doing any of that. We just need to forward all the digits. And that's it. I mean, this router here now is ready to go. So we're going to set up router 2 real quick, and then we're going to test some calls. All right, so real quick, I'm not going to show you the whole config on router 2 because you just watched me do it on router 1, and it's essentially the exact same thing. But I am going to show you a couple of things really quickly here so that you can see the error that you get if you don't have enough PVDM modules. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into the configuration terminal, and I'm going to activate both cards in this one. So I did the card type command for 00 and for the one that's in slot 02. So we want to network clock participate. Okay, then we want to do our ISDN switch type primary and I. So now we can get into our controller. Or T1, what is it, 000. And we'll do our cable length again. Short, what is it, 110. We'll do our PRI Group of, what is it, time slots 1 through 24. That sets up the first controller. We'll exit that controller. So then we're going to do controller 020. And we're going to set up our cable length. Now, I don't have enough PVDM slots in this one. So I'm going to try and put 24 time slots on the second controller. It's going to give me an error. See, it says not enough DSP resources available to configure PRI Group on controller. The remaining DSP resources are enough for 5 time slots. So basically, when you don't have enough, it's going to tell you how many you can put. So I guess that's worth something, right? You don't have to set up with all 24. It'll use as few as you get, but you can't pipe as many calls through the T1. So if you don't have enough PVDM, at least you can get this set up with a smaller number of slots until maybe you get a bigger PVDM or whatever. So that's all I want to show you for now. I'm going to go ahead and speed through the rest of this and get this all configured, and then we'll go try some phone calls. So incidentally, I do want to show you one more thing in this configuration, because I'm down to where I'm going to put the dial peer in, and there is something I did differently on this one, and I did it for a very good reason, and we'll get to that soon. So in this dial peer, again, I called it voice 10 pots, just like I did in the other one. But if you notice the destination pattern here, I just put 4 dots. And what that means is any number that I dial that's 4 digits will leave that interface. Now, it will still call the internal lines, because lines that are set up with specific numbers will take precedence over wildcards. So because those lines on the FXS cards have specific numbers on them, they will have precedence over this connection. But any number that is not found in one of those will now try to leave and go see if it can find a place on another router to call. And I did this for a good reason, and we'll get to that eventually. And the other side where I did put the 2 and the 3-digit wildcard to call this router is because this router is the end of the line. I'm going to write the config on these just so we don't lose them. And I think we're ready to go try out some phone calls. All right, so we're over here by the phones. Now again, the 2 red phones are connected to router 2, and the blue and black phone are connected to router 1. Incidentally, if you look down here now, we have no alarm lights on either one of our T1 cards. We only have the carrier detect lights, so that's a good sign. That means our T1 is probably working. So let's go ahead and make some calls. So this one here is plugged into port 1, so this is 2000, and the blue phone over here is plugged into port 1, and that is 1000. So let's use phone 2000 to call 1000. And lo and behold, our blue phone is ringing. Now, these phones here are connected to the 01 port on either side, so 2001 and 1001. So let's go this way this time. Let's call from this side over to the red phones. So if we pick this up, we should call 2001, and that's our red phone. So now we have 2 telephone calls at the same time, one is going from router 1 to router 2, and the other one's going from router 2 to router 1 through the T1. So let's take a look at what that looks like in our console. So I can come in here to router 1, config, and I can do a show voice call. So this is our T1, and this is, so it's 00023, which was the serial interface. 1 is the first slot in the PRI group. So our state is connect. And here we have STSP connect, caller ID 2001, calling 1001. So that's what we did over there, right? We picked up phone 2001, and that's why I made sure to express exactly which phone I was picking up and doing what with, so that you will see that this is actually passing caller ID information too. So it knows what phone is calling the other phone. So that's pretty cool. If we go down here, here on port 23, this is our other call. So here, state, TSP connect, whatever that means, caller ID 1000, calling 2000. So this is when we took the black phone on router 1 and called back to the red phone on router 2. So this is it. I mean, here's proof right here in the config that we have 2 slots in the T1s, both handling calls at the same time from 2 different routers going in 2 different directions. And there we have it. that's what I was asked to do in this video, and we have proved it. Now, I can't leave that alone. I have to level this up a little bit. I'm going to put in a third router, and we're going to make a call from router 2 through router 1 to router 3. So I'll show you here. I have an image of what we're going to do. So we're going to add a third router, the one at the top there, with lines 3000 to, actually it's more than 3003, but just for demonstration's sake, we're going to add a T1 that goes back to router 1, and we're going to use router 1 because it has enough DSP slots in it to handle another T1 card, which router 2 doesn't. I showed you that. And yeah, and then we're going to make a call from one of the 3000 lines back to the 2000 lines on router 2. So the call is going to go from router 3 down through router 1 to router 2, and then we'll make one back and show that we could actually route this data through multiple routers. And router 3 is a little bit different. I'll show you really quick there. Hopefully it's focusing. This is an IAD 2432 -24FXS. This is kind of a cool router that I found, and believe it or not, they're really cheap on eBay right now. I got this for like 50 bucks. And it has this, it has the high density Amphenol plug on it that can support 24 phone lines. Unlike the 2811s, you cannot put the high density phone module in those routers. It doesn't work because it has to be the EVD slot or whatever it is, and those routers don't have that. So this is actually a pretty cool router. It's a small form factor. Now, the downside to this is it only has one WIC slot, so if you wanted to do a modem in it, I guess you could do a single modem and then tie one of these lines back. The other downside is that it uses this high density slot here, and you have to have some way to adapt that to your phone plugs, or take it out to like a block and punch down phone lines on it or something. So let me get this set up over there. Incidentally, this is already configured, so I don't have to do any configuring on this. It's just ready to go. We are going to have to add some configuration to router 1 and 2 to make this work though, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Okay, so I'll show you real quick here our new setup with the third router added at the top here. So we have this, high density cable that's coming out of the Amphenol connector there. We also have taken one of the built-in T1s, and this one doesn't need a card for T1s. It does have two built-in T1s here. So we've taken one of those and we have tied it into the second T1 card that is in router 1. So router 1 is now going to become the hub for everything that we're doing. And if we follow this cable back over to this desk, I actually have this nice telephone block here that breaks the large Amphenol out into, and thank you Ameritech, into actually 25 lines, but the Cisco router only offers 24, so that gives us our phone hooked to router number 3. Okay, so while router number 3 boots up, let's do a little bit more configuring in router number 1 and router number 2. Okay, so let's get router 1 configured now. While the new router is booting up, we can do this real quick. We could say card type T1 02, and then network clock participate WIC 2. We already have the ISDN switch type primary, so we don't need that again. We do need to go into the controller, or T1, this is 020, right? Our cable length short 110, PRI Group time slots 1 through 24. I'd already done that, so that's why it's saying that. It's no big deal. So the other thing we have to do is interface serial 020 this time. 23. Now, we do have to go into the serial interface. The only command we have to put in there is the protocol emulate, right? Because again, this is like the root router that is acting like the telephone company. So we need the ISDN, what is it? Protocol emulate, network, like that. So the last thing we got to do is put a dial peer. We're gonna use dial peer 20 because this is card 020. I can't put zeros in the front, so it messes me up. But dial peer voice 20 pots. Now, like we did on the first card, where we had the 2 ... we can't just go ... here because then it will be confused on where to send the packets, right? Because this is now the hub, right? So we have to say destination pattern 3 ... Yeah. So it could get confusing if you like strung a bunch of routers together on these things. You know, I mean, you'd really have to think about what numbers you put where, so that you can. And you can do things in your pattern, like you can put in brackets like 2 to 3 ... and it'd be like 2000 or 3000. So if you had multiple routers down a chain that had other numbers, you can do that. So, but again, it takes some forethought as far as like what numbers you're going to put where, because it would make sense that like routers in a chain had them you know, strung together like that, because there are some limitations to what you can do in the destination patterns. You know, putting numbers right next to one another is easy. So yeah, definitely think about that if you're going to put together a large lab setup. So again, the incoming number, we don't care. We're just going to accept all numbers with a dot. Fax rate disable. This way, if we do any modem stuff on there, that'll give us a cleaner line. We want direct inward dial. And our most important one, again, is the port. This time it's 02023, because it's in WIC slot 2 in that cluster. Yeah, incidentally, if you didn't put all 24 ports in the PRI group, that number on the serial port will be smaller. So pay attention to that in the config, because it wouldn't be 23, right? If you had to put less slots in your PRI group. So something to keep an eye out for. And then we're going to do our forward digits all. And I think we're done. This should work now. We should try it out and see. So again, we'll look at this one more time. You know, we've now told router 1 that the line going down, that PRI line going down to router 3 is handling anything from 3000 to 3999. So yeah, let's try it. I got my black phone here. I have dial tone. And this one is hooked to router 3, and port 1 on this little slot thing here is 1, so its number is going to be 3000. What we wanted to do is we wanted to call from 3 right all the way back to router 2. So I actually probably need 2 phones over here, because, well, I mean, we could do it anyway. We know if it works in one direction, it's going to work anywhere. So router 2, let's see if we can call. We got something plugged into port 2000. Yeah, it's one of the red phones. Looks like it's the red phone sitting on top. So let's say router 2 is 2000. And just like that, hello, we're talking. Hello. And it sounds very good. Good voice quality. So now I have a call going between there and there. So I can also take let's see, the blue phone is plugged into port 1 on router 1, and the other red phone on router 2 is the one on top here. So let's call that one from the blue phone. And that would be 2001. So now I have calls going from router 3 through router 1 back to router 2, and then from router 2 to router 1, I believe. Let's show, what was it, voice call? Okay, so this time we're in slot 1 and 2. We have slot 1 is handling a call between 2000 and 3000. So yeah, that's it, right? Looks like in slot 2 here I have 2001, so this is our router 1 calling router 2 calling router 1, sorry. Slot is getting confusing, there's too many routers. And I don't see any other calls. Wait. Oh yeah, we do. Okay, yeah, because there's calls on both T1 cards. Yes. So the second T1 card actually has 2000 calling 3000 there. It's weird that it's going in the wrong direction. But that's it. It shows which one's calling what. Let's see if we look at, so we get in router 3 here. Let's show voice call here. Oh, that's weird, because that one shows 2000 calling 3000 also. And I swear I called from this black phone to router 2000. So pretty cool. I mean, other than the little bit of semantic nonsense of which phone is calling which in the voice call statement here, this is pretty cool now. I mean, we can do a lot of powerful stuff with this. And, you know, the other upside to doing this too is, you know, if you're messing around with modems and stuff like that, you can use ATAs, you know, with PBXs to do SIP, and it works fine for voice calls, but it just, those codecs that SIP uses just really does not do any kind of justice to, you know, the modem calls. I was able to get, with that kind of a setup, maybe 14.4 at the max, and in theory this should be really no different than you know, actual phone lines would have been, even going through the T1s. So, you know, there's using modems to make calls through these, you know, you're going to get a lot higher data rates. I know I was able to get 33.6 no problem going through through these routers. So thanks for joining me today. If you stayed with me in the video this long, I certainly appreciate that. The next video I have coming out is going to be something really cool. So if you want to see about that, hit that like and subscribe, and maybe even tap the little bell down there so that you get notification as to when my next video comes out. And I don't know when my next video about phones is going to be. I'll try to make it sooner rather than later. I'm trying not to go as long as I did between these two videos. But again, thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good one.